This is Marathon Training Academy, episode 331.
This podcast is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the ultimate daily all-in-one health drink with 75 proven vitamins, minerals that makes it easy for you to get comprehensive nutrition. Just go to athleticgreens.com/MTA. With our link, you can get 20 free travel packs, which are valued at $79, along with your first purchase. That's athleticgreens.com/MTA. Welcome to the Marathon Training Academy podcast, where we empower you to run a marathon and change your life. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Angie.
In this episode, we bring you one of our world-famous race recaps. Angie's going to tell you about the ups and downs of her recent 50-mile ultra, which was last weekend. And of course, you can get all of the good stuff inside the Academy, training plans, back podcast episodes, and more. Find out how to become a member when you visit marathontrainingacademy.com. Well, on our last episode, we kind of teased that we have a virtual half marathon in the works. Every year we do the MTA podcast virtual half marathon, and we've done other virtual races this year, of course, but people kept asking us if we're going to do the virtual half, and this will be the fourth year in a row, and I guess we got to keep the streak going, right?
That's right.
So we got a super cool medal made that commemorates 10 years of us doing the podcast. So the way it works is you register, we'll send you a half marathon training plan, either miles or metric, and then you have from now until the end of the year to run your half. You could also combine it with another race if you want to do that. All we ask is that you run or walk the full 13.1 miles, 21.1 kilometers before the end of the year, and we ship out the medals and all the good stuff in December. And to get a look at the medal that we had designed, just go to marathontrainingacademy.com/half. It's sort of a throwback, kind of a retro. Think back to the early days of podcasting, maybe how you used to consume podcasts before it was so easy to get them on your phone. That's all I'm going to say about it. Like I said, it commemorates 10 years of this show. Speaking of which, I'd like to say just a huge word of thanks to everyone who's been listening for that long. We've got folks that have been listening to us since 2010, and of course, tons of listeners that tuned in after that. And if you're new, if you just found us, welcome. Hope you enjoy this episode. Angie's going to take us to the race that she just did and really make us feel the agony of doing 50 miles. And we're all going to think, why would you want to do that? Before we jump into that, though, let's go ahead and get some shout outs to folks in our community.
That's right. We've been enjoying keeping up with the Social Distancing Run Facebook group. We've got a lot of people in there who are doing the 100-mile challenge, of course. Some people have just started. Some people have completed that. So we want to give a few shout outs to people in the group. Louis posted, he said, I did my social distancing run on my 60th birthday, and I awarded myself with the 32-kilometer challenge run. I loved it. So I like how he puts that he awarded himself with a 32-kilometer run, or 20 miles, basically.
Yeah.
Great way to celebrate.
Turning 60.
A new decade. This note is from Caroline. She says, I recently celebrated my first runniversary by doing the social distancing run. This time last year, I began my running journey when I decided to run my first ever 5K. Let's just say that race forever changed my life. I fell hard and in love with running. Thankfully, I'm so much healthier physically and mentally now. There's just something about running down a path and thinking about all the things that make you hurt, happy, and or excited. And there's a feeling of peace and tranquility. I lost my son in February of 2016 and fell into a deep depression, but I kept trying to find a coping mechanism and finally found one.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Caroline. I'm glad that you found running to be a great coping mechanism, and congrats on your 1-year runniversary.
That's right. This note comes from Johnny. He says, running a marathon has been a goal since high school. I've started training for them in the past, but then something always came up. I turned 40 this year and thought, now or never. I started training in January and was supposed to run the famous Idaho Potato Marathon at the end of May. Because honestly, who doesn't want that t-shirt? But it was canceled like the others. That's when I found the social distancing run to keep me motivated to put in the miles. I was able to run my own marathon, and it ended with the best fan club ever, my wife and 2 boys. I did an out and back course along the Boise River Greenbelt. Along the way, I almost got hit by a golf ball and had to jump over a swarm of bees that decided to ball up on the path. Other than that, it was full of blue skies and beautiful views. The run went way better than I expected until mile 24 when I burned out and started to cramp badly. The last 2.2 miles were grueling and my pace got slower, but I pulled off a 7:45 pace average, so I'll take that for my first attempt.
That's really good.
That's very fast. Thanks again to the Social Distancing Run for the motivation and being part of my first marathon story.
Wow. Congrats, Johnny, on getting it done on your own. It's not easy just to go out there and do your own self-supported race, especially at a 7:45 pace.
This note comes from Brenna. She says, the 24-hour race for my 30th birthday was canceled, so my crazy friends and I decided to plan our own 50K to celebrate. My amazing mom, Terry, acted as my aid station. It was wonderful to get so much love from my friends and family.
I think we have a birthday theme going on here.
I know.
60, 40, 30. People are deciding to go run a long ways on their birthdays.
I think birthdays do kind of act as a catalyst to help us think about goals and reevaluate our fitness and our life.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool how a lot of people decide to take up running as a result of a birthday or planning for a birthday or, challenge themselves to go further.
It's a good way to just stick it to old age.
That's right. And actually continuing on in the theme, this last note is from John. He says, I did 52 kilometers for my 52nd birthday. It was my first ultra. I'm so thankful to my son, Sam, for joining me for 10 miles. I would have quit at 26.2 if he had not been there to take me on home.
Is like everyone having a birthday this year or what?
I think everyone is hopefully having a birthday this year.
Congrats, John, on running 52K on your 52nd birthday. That's a clever idea. You're smart for doing kilometers instead of miles.
Are you saying I'm not smart for just doing a 50-miler?
We will see. We're going to jump into your race recap. So Angie went up into the Pine Creek Challenge 50-miler in northern Pennsylvania. Let's go ahead and jump into that right now.
So I didn't really plan on running a 50-miler this fall. I was signed up for the Marine Corps Marathon in October, and of course, that turned into a virtual race. And I knew that I needed to see if I could find a new challenge, and preferably something that was an in-person race, which is a bit challenging these days. So I looked around on the website ultrasignup.com, and I found the Pine Creek Challenge, which takes place in northern Pennsylvania. And it was kind of interesting because one of my goals this year after I finished my 50-state journey back in January was to run a few more local races because I had kind of ignored local stuff just because I was trying to finish my last few states. So I heard really good things about this race. They offered several distances, including a 100-miler, a 100K, 50-miler, and marathon. So I decided the 50-miler sounded like a good challenge considering the race was just 7 weeks away from the time that I signed up. Fortunately, I'd kept a strong running base over the summer and was able to gradually increase my mileage and then got in a good taper. But honestly, I didn't have like the kind of buildup that I did for my last 50-miler, which was 5 years ago.
Yeah, you actually ran ultras in prep for your 50-miler back in the day.
Yes. When I did my first 50-miler, I did a race weekend, which included a Friday night 10K, a Saturday morning 25K, and a Sunday morning 50K, all on trails. So I definitely got a lot more trail time, which was not the case this time around. But I did get up to a 70-mile week and thankfully stayed healthy. So I was pretty confident going into it that I'd be able to finish. My sister Autumn also signed up for the marathon, so we decided it would be a fun race/sisters weekend.
Was it?
Well, mostly.
So what can you tell us about the Pine Creek Challenge?
It is put on by the Tioga Running Club, which is a nonprofit organization formed for charitable purposes. And the race this year was held on September 12th, and it was the 9th annual event. So they've been doing it for a while. In their brochure, they describe this race as, quote, "This endurance challenge is well suited for the first-time ultra runner utilizing the Pine Creek Rail Trail, which stretches 63 miles from Wellsboro Junction to Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania. It is listed as one of the finest bike rides in the Northeast." So Autumn and I drove up north about 3.5 hours, and we got there to Wellsboro and went to packet pickup. It was held at the Wild ASAF Outfitters. The race also offered free camping at the starting area. They had porta pots out there, but there wasn't any running water, and apparently cell reception was really spotty. Autumn and I kind of drove out to the starting area just to kind of do some reconnaissance. And there were actually a good number of people who took advantage of the camping, but we decided to stay at the Penwells Lodge in Wellsboro, partly because she wasn't sure how to set up her tent. and I'm not really like huge on roughing it. So it is Saturday, September 12th, and Autumn and I are in the car driving to the start of our race. Autumn, how are you feeling about today?
I just got my coffee, so I will be awake in a few minutes, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling pretty relaxed. I'm not really putting any time pressure on myself, so I'm just excited to get out there and do a race and just try to enjoy myself. So yeah, I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they conduct the race. They have different start times for the different race distances. So Autumn will have a little time to hang around after I'm off. In fact, she'll probably end up doing a lot of waiting today because I have no idea how long it's going to take me to do the 50-miler. I'm feeling good. However, my period decided to start yesterday. So, for all the ladies out there who can relate, you kind of feel crampy and bloated and your stomach's like a little bit like blah. But like Autumn said, I'm really just excited about being able to do an in-person race and to challenge myself and go the distance, whatever that is going to look like today. So we arrived at the race starting line on Saturday morning. They capped registration at 200 runners, and they had staggered starts for each race to kind of help with social distancing measures. The start was held at one of the aid stations because the course was kind of an out and back. And so there were a lot of people standing around there, kind of cheering people on, waiting to see their runner come back.
One, go! Here we go, baby.
Pick him up, put him down. Let's go.
So Angie, how were you feeling that morning? Were you nervous about the fact that you were going to have to run 50 miles?
I really wasn't too nervous about the distance, which maybe I should have been. I think I was most nervous because I wasn't feeling that great. My period had started the day before, so my legs were feeling really heavy and kind of crampy. My stomach and GI system were a little bit off. And so I just kind of felt like, ugh.
Oh.
Like, if I'd been feeling like that on any other day, like for a long run, I probably would have delayed the long run just because, you don't have your best experience when you're dealing with that.
So here you are, about to start a 50-mile run, and you already feel, ugh.
Yeah.
And your legs feel heavy, and you haven't even run a mile yet.
Yeah.
This is going to be a sufferfest.
I was thinking very positively. I wasn't really thinking about that. And actually,
Well, that's good.
The weather was really beautiful. In so many ways, it was ideal. I felt like really, really lucky to be doing an in-person race that was so well organized. The course was awesome as well. It was an out and back. They used 25 miles of the Upper Canyon section of the Pine Creek Rail Trail. And this section is through the Grand Canyon of the East in Pine Creek Gorge. So the gorge stretches for about 47 miles. It's nearly a mile wide and about 1,450 feet deep at its deepest point. And this section of Pine Creek is listed as a National Natural Landmark. The trail itself is level, packed limestone surface. It's got about a 2% grade, so it's not challenging. It's not technical at all. So yeah, I mean, in so many ways, like everything was perfect. So I was trying to dwell on the positives rather than, the negatives.
Well, that's a good way to frame things up. So you're not feeling good, but you get outside your thoughts, you look around at how lucky you are to be there, like you said, how beautiful it is, and just let the positive thoughts come in.
Yeah, and I really started out strong, feeling good. Started at a pace where I felt like I could maintain it for a long time. And it was chugging along pretty good until about mile 20. But before I got to mile 20, I got to meet a podcast listener named Melissa out on the course.
That's awesome.
She recognized me, and she was doing her first 50-miler to celebrate turning 50 this year, and she was running really strong. And turns out later, I looked at the results, and she was the first place female finisher with a time of 8 hours and 32 minutes.
Awesome.
So huge congratulations to Melissa. It was exciting to be able to meet her and know that she did so well. A little bit more about the course. At the beginning, when we listened to the pre-race briefing, the 50-milers started out with a 5-mile out and back toward the north end of the trail, and then we would come back towards south and do a 20-mile out and back. The course should have been idiot-proof, but I must not have listened well enough at the pre-race briefing.
That doesn't sound like you.
He was kind of quiet, and I was trying not to stand too close to people. We're trying to socially distance. And the race director said that he was worried that his signs might get stolen, but that they were located just after the 25-mile trail marker, which was located after the final aid station at Blackwell. He said, but if you get to mile marker 26, then you'd gone too far and you got free bonus miles. So I remember that distinctly. So I'm running along. I get to the final aid station at Blackwell, and I'm like, oh, good. Finally, we get to turn around soon. So I get to the turnaround spot, and there's a sign that says 100K turnaround, and there's another sign that says 100-mile turnaround. But there was no sign saying anything about the 50-miler. So I'm like, well, maybe it's just ahead. For some reason, the way they calculated the course, it must be just ahead. And, in my mind, I thought I saw like a white sign up ahead. So I'm like, it would be the worst thing ever to get here and then not go far enough and cut the course, because then I would feel like this whole thing had been in vain because I had cheated. So I'm like, I will not cut this course. I'm going to go to the 50-mile turnaround spot. So I kept going and kept going. There were no other runners, but that wasn't unusual because, it was
Everyone's
pretty spread out.
out.
Could go for a while without seeing people. And I just kept thinking, just around the next bend, I'll see this sign. Well, it turns out, just around the next bend, I get to the mile marker 26 and realized that I was one of the chumps getting the free bonus miles. I laughed at it then.
But you never saw a sign that said 50-mile turnaround here.
There was no sign that said 50-mile turnaround here. So, as a literal person, I did not want to risk not turning around at the right spot.
And there's so many out and backs that it's not like you can just figure out that, hey, this is turnaround, I got to go back.
Well, I probably could have if I could do math while I ran, but but yeah, the 100K had, had different out and backs that they were doing. The 100-milers had different out and backs. So there was, different scenarios. The marathoners had turned around already previously. So there was their sign before that, but there was no 50-mile sign.
So you got a soundbite from this moment in the race. Let's take a listen.
Well, I'm at mile 32 right now, and I think I missed the turnaround because he said it's beyond the 25-mile mark, but if you get to mile 26, then you've gone too far. So I saw signs that said 100-mile and 100K turnaround, but it said nothing about the 50-miler. So then I kept going and then came to mile marker 26. So I'm guessing that it was supposed to turn around back there. So yeah, what's an extra mile when you're doing 50 miles, right? Anyway, it's still beautiful, enjoying the afternoon. There's lots of cyclists out on the trail, and I'm sure once I get back to the race course, there will be runners again. Anyway, I'll just keep moving forward.
So Angie, this moment is after you've run about 30 miles because of all these out and backs, and you still sound pretty positive about 2 extra miles that you're going to have to run.
My famous last words, what's an extra mile? I will say that the aid stations were really great. When you're doing a trail race, that's often, one of the best things about the race because you don't see many spectators out on the course. Often you're spending a lot of time running by yourself. And they had 6 aid stations spaced about 5 miles apart. And they were staffed by great volunteers. They had all sorts of different food and drink options. And one thing they did was they portioned all the food and packaged it separately so that there weren't multiple people touching things. It was also a cupless race. So volunteers had you open your bottle or your hydration pack for them to fill it with whatever you wanted. And then they had all the normal fueling products like electrolytes. They had cookies, candy, pickles, chips, pretzels. They made sandwiches to order. They had ramen noodles and coffee and just all kinds of things. So we were definitely not short of food whatsoever.
And this being an ultra, you had to gear up. You probably were decked out with all kinds of gear, right?
Yeah, someone asked me to share what gear I wore, and it's important that you wear tried and true gear during an ultra because it's not the time when you're running a long distance like this that you want to find out that your new shorts that you just got cause chafing or all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, I wore some tried and true gear, my High Elite Irish shorts, which are very comfortable. They've got great pockets. I wore compression socks. I wore gaiters around the tops of my shoes to keep out dirt and debris. I wore my On Cloud Venture trail shoes, and then my trusty hydration pack, which is a Nathan Vapor Aeris. It's got a 2-liter bladder. It's got lots of great pockets, so I could keep my phone really close and all my fuels and everything. And I also have to brag on my Coros Apex running watch. Now, this is not an ad, but when I started the race, it had a 95% battery charge. And when I finished, spoiler alert, over 10 hours later, the battery was still at 60%.
That's awesome.
So 35% was used during that time. Contrast this to my first 50 miler 5 years ago. My Garmin watch died at mile 40, which was very devastating.
Well, my Apple Watch, and it's kind of old, but it usually dies at mile 25 in a marathon.
Yeah, that would be time to
But I
get a
do
new watch.
But I do listen to music and, of course, have the activity going. So I'm watching my miles. And I'm probably like checking my email and all kinds of stuff that demands battery.
Yes, it does. So I was really excited about how my watch held up. So all my gear was stuff that I'd used before. Unfortunately, my feet swelled a lot during the race, and it caused so much pain in the top of both feet. I had to stop several times to loosen my shoes. And finally, I had them loosened so much that they felt like they were slopping around. But that was all my feet could tolerate because they were so sore. You know, just one of those random freakish things that you hardly ever experience. And then, of course, it's got to happen when you're in the midst of a challenge like that.
So at what mile out of 50 miles, at what mile did you feel like you were running on tired legs?
Well, I started out and my legs just felt kind of heavy and like a little bit crampy, like my veins felt kind of crampy. But I felt mostly good until about mile 18. By mile 20, I was experiencing some upper hamstring discomfort, and it was sending like shooting pains down my left leg. So between the shooting pains and my swollen feet, I did a lot of walking between miles 20 and 35.
So at mile 20, you feel like this, and you still have 30 more miles to go.
Yes.
What's going on inside your brain?
I just had to take it one step at a time. I had to really try to push the discomfort, the pain out of my mind. I actually thought of something that Marshall Ulrich said when he was running across America, how he had to like disown his foot.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to disown my left leg. So yeah, I just had to just keep pushing myself forward. Like I said, walking sort of helped. It was still painful. Finally, at mile 35, I just got really upset at myself because I knew if I continued at the pace I was going, I'd be out there for another 4 hours. And I was like, I am just ready to be done. Like, I am done. So I made myself start running again and then would just take brief walk breaks at each mile when I took a drink. So like my watch would buzz to signal another mile. I would drink water, walk for like a minute or so, and then like force myself to start running again.
But you never thought about quitting?
I didn't. No. I'm too stubborn, I think, to quit.
So you just toughed it out, ran, walked, pushed yourself through the pain and discomfort, the miserable hamstring issue and swollen feet and everything for 30 more miles, plus the 2 extra miles due to missing the turnaround.
Yes. I think that was like really weighing on my mind the last few miles. I was feeling really mad at myself. Why did I miss that turnaround? I would be almost done. And I did get a little soundbite at mile 51, which listening back to it, I feel like I sound a lot more cheerful than I think I actually was.
Well, my watch currently reads 51.3 miles, but I am not at the finish because of my little extra. I'm thinking maybe 2 miles left to the finish. I'm hoping it's not more than that. Definitely ready to be done. My legs are alternately heavy and tired and cramping. But that's to be expected for being at this distance, I think. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that finish line and seeing how Autumn's race went. and sitting down, changing clothes, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's it for now.
Well, you are normally a cheerful person when you're out there running and doing races, but I think later you sort of started calculating that you could have had a PR had you not made that mistake and run those extra 2 miles, and that sort of soured your mood for a little while, didn't it?
It did, because going into it, I knew that my previous 50-mile time was 10 hours and 5 minutes. And so then when I hobble across the finish line in 10 hours and 7 minutes, having run, I looked down my watch, 53.2 miles.
53.
Like all the extra little things you do going to the porta pot.
All the weaving on the path that you did.
Yes. Anyway, I just felt mad. I'm like, wow, it was my own stupidity that I'm out here this long.
It happens. I think stupidity is too harsh of a word. Like, it happens. It's a mistake. But you still held it together and pushed through to the end. You didn't quit. Nothing wrong with people that do, but still an epic day for you to run 53 miles in 10 hours. That's amazing. I would still be out there doing it.
No, you wouldn't. Well, I think another thing that was messing with my mindset too was that because of the out and backs, I'm seeing 100K people out there and 100 milers. And I was like putting myself in their shoes, and I'm like thinking like, oh my goodness, I'm hurting so much. I'm just doing the 50 miler. There are people who are going to be out there all night. And when I reached the finishers area, I was so ready to be done. Autumn was there waiting for me because she had finished hours before because she did the marathon. And so she was videoing me crossing the finish line. Here was an indication of how tired I was. I didn't even care about the finish line food, which is a first for me. Mm-hmm. I'm always all about the food. So apparently I fueled well enough that I wasn't that hungry. But I just wanted to get out of my wet clothes and sit down. So they had a timing mat set up at the finish area and an arch to cross at the end. And then went over to the awards table to get the medal. And they didn't have, of course, all the results up at that point. But later I was able to look at them. And interestingly enough, the 100-miler was the most popular distance.
Wow.
They had 54 finishers, 19 people DNF'd, so there was even more people out there. For the 50-miler, there were 36 finishers. I finished 17th with a time of 10:07:36.
So you're right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the middle. The winner finished in 8 hours and 5 minutes. And of course, we talked about Melissa, the listener I met. She finished in 8:32. She was the first place female. The marathon had 24 total finishers. Autumn finished in 4:17:31. She was the second place female and 7th place overall. The male winner finished in 2 hours and 59 minutes, so he was very speedy.
Well, huge congrats to Autumn, Angie's sister, on doing 4:17:31, second place female. I bet she was feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, she was. She had a great race experience. I was able to see her once out on the course, and she looked really strong. Fortunately, she was able to drive us to our sister Amy's house where we were staying the night, and it felt so amazing to shower and relax and get off my feet.
Well, Angie, huge congrats on toughing it out, going the distance, and finishing a 50-miler. This now makes, 65 marathons and ultras that you've done.
That's right.
Big hug. You guys hear that?
Pat, pat, pat.
Tap, pat, pat. In just a minute, we're going to talk about how to deal with disappointment after a race. Maybe things don't go like you want. And it doesn't have to be a race. It can be a run, a long run. How to process a disappointing race experience or long run experience. Because like you heard Angie talk about, she was out there longer than she wanted to be, dealing with tired legs and all kinds of stuff. But before we jump into that, we'd like to give a quick word of thanks to this episode's sponsor, Athletic Greens. And if you guys haven't tried Athletic Greens yet, go to athleticgreens.com/MTA. You can get free travel packs, 20 free travel packs when you make your first purchase. And those are handy for, taking on the road. Angie, you probably took Athletic Greens with you.
Yeah, I definitely took it race morning and the days following the race to help recover. It's definitely something that I don't go a day without. Athletic Greens is delivered in powder form, and that means it requires less capsules, and it has a superior absorption and doesn't include any binders or fillers. As your body's nutritional needs change due to stress, travel, sleep patterns, the environment, and more, one scoop of Athletic Greens provides a convenient, affordable, and tasty solution to fill the gaps in your diet. If you were to take each supplement individually, it'd be the equivalent of 12 to 14 pills per day, plus the antioxidant equivalent of 12 servings of fruit and vegetables. So you'd be hard-pressed to find more comprehensive nutrition in one spot.
And it tastes good. That's the beautiful thing about it. Jump over to athleticgreens.com/MTA to get that special offer. athleticgreens.com/MTA. Thanks also to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode. They make a breakfast cereal that is not full of sugar and carbs and all the junk that a lot of breakfast cereals are made of. In fact, Magic Spoon has cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry flavored cereal, and they even make it in a fun box. Kind of makes you feel like a big kid. But cool thing about it is it has 0 sugar, 11 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. It tastes amazing, and it's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, GMO-free, just all the things. If you get it, hide it from your kids.
Yeah, Trevor hides it from me too.
No, that wouldn't be fair.
Just head over to magicspoon.com/MTA to grab a variety pack and try it out today. And be sure to use our promo code MTA at checkout to get free shipping. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. That's magicspoon.com/MTA and use the code MTA for free shipping.
So as we look back over Angie's race recap, we thought, what are some takeaways that people can get from her experience? And Angie, you had the idea of putting some tips together about how to process a disappointing race experience. What gave you the inspiration?
Let me think. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this topic up because if you've had a disappointing race or even running experience, you're not alone. If you run long enough and you continue challenging yourself, at some point it's sure to happen. And it's definitely not enjoyable and sometimes can be really tough to process. Sometimes the phenomenon is known as post-race blues. Post-race blues or even mild post-race depression is really not something that gets talked about in the running community that much, but it is very common. Often runners talk about feeling like a rock star crossing the finish line or having a sense of euphoria post-race, having pride in their accomplishment, and experiencing a generalized relaxation, calmness, relief, and even a mental high. But it's important to remember those feelings are not always there, and even if you do experience a post-race high, these good sensations do start fading anywhere from a few hours to a few days post-race, and that can leave you feeling anything but great. Now, you'd think that post-race blues might only happen after a disappointing or horrible race, but it can actually happen after conquering a new distance or getting an amazing PR. It also happens to some people during periods of injury or even hitting a plateau in their training. So I think it's important to talk about because it can happen a lot. And I think people think that they're alone when they have that experience. Now, like most cases of post-race blues or mild depression, there's usually a physical as well as a psychological reason behind it. Many athletes describe it as a hollow feeling or a lack of purpose, coming down from a high, maybe feeling low or grumpy or irritable. Trevor's nodding his head at my behavior. Getting back to reality, maybe a loss or some sadness, a lack of motivation, and maybe guilt. Some people may feel very emotional and may start crying and can't seem to stop. It can also be accompanied by physical sensations such as fatigue, listlessness, generalized achiness, a desire to sleep a lot, overindulgence in food and or alcohol, and avoidance of social situations and other activities. So we're going to give you some suggestions on how to get through the disappointment that you may have experienced or even post-race blues, even if you had a good race, and ways to become more resilient. Number one is to acknowledge all your feelings and thoughts, even if they seem irrational. I think sometimes we want to just put a happy face on it and think, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But that doesn't really help us deal with it either. And while you're acknowledging your thoughts and feelings, try not to compare yourself with other people. Comparison is a huge temptation because there will be people who finish twice your distance and look strong and fresh. So something that I was dealing with. There'll be people who set great PRs and seem on top of the world. There may be people twice your age who finish faster than you. And this self-recrimination can be especially tough if you had a DNF or did not finish, maybe due to injury, not making a cutoff time, or simply giving up. Dwelling on these things can cause you to be too hard on yourself and not appreciate your accomplishment. Now, I know I dealt with feeling upset with myself because, like I talked about before, the weather was perfect. The course was easy. It was an actual in-person race, and I still feel like my performance bombed. But because you may not be your most rational self in this post-race period, make sure you don't make any important decisions in the few days after a tough race. Being in a low place physically, mentally, or emotionally may not result in you being your best or your most rational self.
So you felt like you had some irrational thoughts when you're caught up in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt kind of like a failure, and I know that's not true. I mean, I finished the race. I accomplished what I set out to accomplish.
Finished right in the middle of the pack?
Yeah, there were so many positive things, but I had to acknowledge my feelings and thoughts to be able to process and get through them. Mm-hmm. So maybe guilt that I wasn't as strong as I should have been while there were other people out there suffering more. That was something that was true, but was kind of irrational to dwell on and not helpful. So, just acknowledge all those things. When we try to stuff those feelings or thoughts, then they tend to just kind of fester and can come out in other more negative ways. The second thing is to take plenty of time to recover physically. Sometimes physical fatigue can manifest with a low mood or even depressive symptoms. So be sure to eat well, to hydrate, and get extra rest in the days following a race. Now, this may be especially hard because after all your training and the challenge of the race, you may kind of feel lazy. I know it's hard for me sometimes to slow down, even though I need to. But for example, after the 50-miler, I took one total rest day, and then just for the next 3 days, I just did easy walks, just to keep my body moving, do some active recovery.
One whole day?
One whole day of rest.
I would have taken a rest week.
Well, like I said, it's really hard for me to rest. So I include the walking days, those are basically restful for me as well.
I meant to say rest month. That's what I would have done.
I sat in the sauna and I got a massage. So all those things were really helping me physically. So don't be hard on yourself about not feeling, quote, normal right away. It's going to take time for your physical stamina to return. So like I talked about, this is a great time to schedule a massage, to take Epsom salt baths, to carve out more time to relax. If you're nursing some niggles or an injury, make sure that you start getting some rehab measures in, do some stretching, and do a little active recovery that doesn't strain the area. It's also important not to hit the training again hard until you've had time to recover. Sometimes we have the desire to throw ourselves back into training as a way to make up for a less than stellar performance. This is probably mostly applicable to like the type A personalities who are highly driven. But I know that after races that didn't go so well, I've not taken enough time to recover, kind of as a way to be like, oh, I need to get tougher, so I need to not take as much time off. And that strategy can be damaging in the long term. Of course, the amount of time that you should take to recover is going to depend on the distance, your experience level, and how you feel post-race. So make sure you enjoy that post-race celebration, but also on the other hand, don't let it turn into a prolonged eating and drinking binge. A lot of times we as runners are more strict with our habits during training, and then when you go into a dietary free-for-all that lasts for days or weeks, it also takes a toll on how you feel physically and mentally. Often foods high in sugar, fat, or those that are highly processed can be inflammatory to the body and leave you feeling worse. I know personally I have a definite sweet tooth, but if I eat too much sugar, it leaves me feeling depressed. So it is not good for me. I have to really make sure I'm careful to rein myself in.
Yeah, it's important to know oneself that way. Know what brings your energy levels up and down. I'm finding that so much of my productivity and just mood and outlook and all that flows from energy management.
That's right. And everyone's a little bit different. So there's not like a one size fits all. But yeah, to get to know yourself, if you're kind of really into documenting things, take notes on how you're feeling and what helps and what doesn't help. As you do more training, as you do more races, you'll definitely see patterns in productive ways to recover and not so productive ways to recover.
Good stuff.
Number 3 is to put the experience into perspective. We often have the tendency to overanalyze our race experience and maybe dwell on what we could have or should have done differently. And I do think it's helpful to do some post-race diagnostics when you're ready. You can think through the things that went wrong and the possible reasons for them. Then you can decide if there are things that you can do going forward to improve in those areas. but don't overthink things. And again, I think certain types of personalities are more of the overanalyzers, overthinkers. So if you find yourself thinking a lot about the race, take time to recognize the things that went right, because there is usually something good that comes from the experience, even if it overall was a disappointment. At the end of the day, most of us are not professional runners, and thankfully our successes or our perceived failures are not held up for the world to see. So if you're struggling through a tough time in your running, be mindful of what you're seeing on social media. We often compare all of our flaws to someone else's highlight reel. So remember that even the person you admire the most has struggles and tough days too. And I really admire professional runners and athletes, or anyone really, who's honest about their ups and downs in their training and racing, because I think it gives us a better perspective on how to deal with the ups and downs that we experience.
Yeah, and I've also found the running community understands this. And inside our various Facebook groups, like for example, our group for members, if someone posts like, oh man, I had a horrible run, and they even share like a screenshot of their splits, everyone cheers them up. They jump in because we've all felt that and we know what it's like. And that's the great thing about just keeping it real with your fellow runners, is because they can kind of give you some perspective.
Exactly. And it's all relative. I mean, your perceived awful race or awful pace is someone else's goal. So really be mindful of that.
So looking back now, Angie, you're 6 days removed from your 50-miler. How are you viewing it now compared to when you crossed the finish line?
Well, I've definitely taken time to think through it and process the thoughts and feelings that I was having. And I did kind of feel like just a little bit emotionally off the first few days. I think you probably noticed. I didn't even really want to talk about the race that much.
Yeah, it was weird.
I was just like, I just need time to process this experience. And I'm the type of person who tends to like kind of go inwardly to process. So I just took some time to think it over and to put it in perspective, and kind of took my own advice with all this stuff. And of course, the extra rest and feeling mentally and physically stronger just by recovering has really helped my perspective as well. So yeah, I'm feeling a lot more at peace with it, and proud of myself that I finished the race.
Well, I'm proud of you too.
Thank you.
I think you're crazy. I would never run that far.
Never say never.
Nah, I might try it someday.
And the fourth thing is to talk about it and get help. Remember that you don't have to be happy with the experience or put on a fake positive attitude. It may take time to process your thoughts and feelings, so don't rush the process. It may be helpful for you to talk with a caring friend, a training partner, a family member, a coach, a running group, even if it's online. Now, if you notice that the post-race blues linger more than 2 weeks, be sure to reach out for help. Don't continue to go through a dark period alone. If you're experiencing periods of intense sadness, extreme fatigue, lack of interest or energy in things you normally enjoy, apathy, hopelessness, or any thoughts of harming yourself, it's very possible that you may be dealing with moderate to severe depression. Now, depression is not a weakness or a failing of some kind, and it's not something that you can just will away. Often a hormonal imbalance in the body or a chemical imbalance in the brain is what you're experiencing. And this may or may not have been exacerbated by heavy training or a tough race experience or lack of recovery. So it's important to not feel ashamed if you're dealing with this, but to seek help. Make sure you get an appointment with a trusted medical professional so that you can pursue the best course of treatment. And in addition, it may be helpful to talk with a therapist.
All right, so in review, number 1, acknowledge your feelings and thoughts. Number 2, take plenty of time to recover physically. Number 3, put the experience in perspective, since we have a tendency to overanalyze our race results. And number 4, talk to somebody about it and get some help if you need it. Angie, thanks for being willing to share this, because I know it was pretty rough those couple days after your race. Like you mentioned, you didn't even want to talk about it with me. So you follow your own advice. And to me, it's like running 50 miles is such an unthinkable distance to run for most people. It kind of makes me wonder, like, what percentage of people in the world are ever going to run that far? I think just for a marathon, like 1% of the population would ever even run a marathon. For a 50 miler, for an ultra, the percentage has to be even less. So anyway, super congrats to you. And everyone out there, just taking action no matter what distance you're at. Just keep making progress, relentless forward motion, as they say. Visit us at marathontrainingacademy.com. You can get our other podcast episodes and read Angie's show notes. And if you have a question, reach out through our contact form. And don't forget about the MTA Podcast Virtual Half Marathon. Check out our super cool medal. Go to marathontrainingacademy.com/half, where there's a video that explains how it works. Until next time, keep taking action. And remember, you have what it takes to run a marathon or a 50-miler and change your life.